Kesha Williams had just relocated to a new educational institution. Her previous environment necessitated the development of combat skills, and 8 years of dedicated martial arts practice had honed her fists into formidable instruments. She was a practitioner of the black belt, veiled in the quietude of adolescence. However, the tormentors failed to perceive this. They saw only a reserved, solitary African-American girl, an easy mark. Consequently, they approached her with demands and threats, intensifying the mistreatment daily. Then one afternoon, they overstepped a boundary. Laughter ensued. Someone declared she merited it. The corridor observed, yet Kesha remained unyielding. They perceived her as feeble. They presumed she would acquiesce. They were mistaken. Before we proceed, please indicate your geographic location in the comments and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you absolutely won't want to miss. The alarm shrieked at 5:30 in the morning, but Kesha Williams was already awake, her gaze fixed on the unfamiliar ceiling of her new sleeping quarters. Detroit felt like a distant epoch, despite only 3 days having elapsed since the moving truck departed from their former residence. She rose from her bed and walked softly to the basement, where her mother had already positioned the punching bag in the corner. 40 minutes later, perspiration dripped from her brow as she concluded her morning regimen. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The sequences flowed as naturally as breathing. 8 years of rigorous instruction had rendered the movements instinctual. Yet today they felt distinct. Today they felt essential. Kesha, breakfast, her mother's voice called from upstairs. Dr. Patricia Williams stood by the stove, still in her medical attire from the night shift at Millbrook General. How are you feeling about today, baby? Fine. Kesha took a piece of toast. Just another school. Her mother's eyes conveyed solicitude. I understand this transition isn't simple. Millbrook is unlike what we are accustomed to. Different was a profound understatement. As Kesha passed through the main entrance of Millbrook High, the expanse of Caucasian faces confirmed her pre-existing knowledge. Out of 800 students, she could count the African-American faces on her fingers. The hallways hummed with typical morning activity, but conversations seemed to falter as she moved past. Whispers trailed in her wake. She kept her head held high, her shoulders relaxed, precisely as Master Chen had instructed her. Never betray vulnerability, but never seek confrontation. The initial period of biology proceeded without significant incident. The second period of history was manageable. However, lunchtime marked the commencement of the true learning experience. The cafeteria extended like a social stratum. The popular students occupied the central tables. Athletes commanded one section. Theater enthusiasts congregated near the windows. Kesha procured a sandwich and searched for an unoccupied space. Well, look what has ambled in. The voice resonated across 3 tables. Derek Morrison stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, possessing a self-assured swagger that stemmed from an unbroken history of unchallenged authority. His Letterman jacket draped impeccably over his broad shoulders, and his smile never reached his frigid blue eyes. Behind him, Jake Wilson cracked his knuckles while Tommy Bradley emitted a snicker. The cafeteria fell into silence. All eyes pivoted towards the brewing confrontation at the room's center. Kesha continued towards a vacant table, but Derek positioned himself in her path. I'm speaking with you. His voice carried the casual dominion of someone accustomed to obedience. We need to have a discussion. She halted, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. About what? About the established order of things around here. Derek's smile widened, revealing an excessive number of teeth. You see, new students typically remit a small welcome tribute. Consider it a form of security, to ensure no untoward incidents befall them. Jake and Tommy flanked her, positioned close enough for her to detect their aftershave. The cafeteria remained deathly silent. 200 students observed as if it were a theatrical performance. Security against what? Kesha's tone remained level, imbued with curiosity rather than defiance. Mishaps. Derek shrugged. Malfunctioning lockers, disappearing textbooks, encounters in the corridors. It's peculiar how clumsy certain individuals can be in this vicinity, particularly those who don't belong, Tommy interjected with a malicious grin. Kesha placed her lunch tray on the nearest surface. Upon turning back to Derek, her posture remained relaxed, yet a discernible change had occurred in her eyes. "I do not pay protection fees." The statement lingered in the air like a challenge. Derek's smile wavered momentarily before reasserting itself with full force. "That's where you err, girl. Everyone pays. The crucial question is whether you pay willingly or you pay dearly." He moved closer, his voice descending to a whisper that inexplicably carried across the silent assembly. "Unless you deem yourself too refined for our modest system here, believing yourself superior to the rest of us, I do not pay at all." She retrieved her tray and maneuvered around him towards the vacant table. For a fleeting instant, Derek stood immobile, clearly taken aback by the outright refusal. The cafeteria held its breath. "This is not concluded," he proclaimed after her, his voice sufficiently loud for all to hear. "No one dares to disrespect me within my domain. No one." Kesha sat down and unwrapped her sandwich as if no event had transpired. However, her peripheral vision meticulously tracked Derek's every movement as he departed in a huff, his associates trailing behind. At a table across the expanse, Marcus Thompson shook his head and murmured to his companion, "That girl has no comprehension of what she has just initiated." The conversations gradually resumed, but the atmosphere had transformed. Word would circulate throughout the school before the lunch period concluded. The new student had just declared hostilities against Derek Morrison. Kesha took a bite of her sandwich, masticating slowly. She had harbored hopes of navigating at least one day without incident. Yet certain occurrences are unavoidable, and yielding to aggressors had never been a viable option. The pertinent inquiry was not whether Derek would retaliate, but rather when and to what extent he would be prepared to proceed. The harassment commenced before the conclusion of the second period. Keisha approached her locker, keys in hand, but the lock refused to engage. She attempted again, verifying the numerical sequence she had committed to memory that morning. Nothing. Encountering difficulties? Jake Wilson materialized beside her, a grin plastered on his face. Locks can be rather temperamental when they've been tampered with. She examined the mechanism. Someone had injected chewing gum into the keyhole. Truly mature. Merely the preliminary stages, Jake remarked, backing away so he could observe her reaction. Derek possesses a long memory. The third period of American history progressed uneventfully. However, as Kesha collected her books, she noticed her notebook was missing, the one containing 3 days' worth of annotations. She rummaged through her bag twice before abandoning the search. In the corridor, she observed Tommy Bradley proudly displaying the notebook to a group of freshmen, executing exaggerated gestures as he recited her handwriting aloud in a mocking tone. Observe this elaborate calligraphy. She must consider herself quite exceptional. Kesha approached calmly. That belongs to me. Provide proof. Tommy held it aloft like a playground antagonist. Perhaps if you request it politely, I shall contemplate its return. She did not request, nor did she attempt to snatch it. Instead, she retrieved her mobile device and captured a photograph of him holding it. What are you doing? Tommy's bravado faltered. Evidence. She returned the phone to her pocket. In the event that I need to file a report for theft. Tommy's countenance contorted, but he tossed the notebook at her feet before stalking away. The pages scattered across the hallway floor. As Kesha knelt to gather her notes, a pair of worn sneakers materialized within her field of vision. She looked up to see Marcus Thompson, the same student who had offered commentary at lunchtime. You require some counsel, Marcus stated quietly, glancing around to ensure they were not being overheard. I am attentive. Derek Morrison is not merely some affluent youth posturing as formidable. His father possesses ownership of half the enterprises in this locale, including the automobile dealership where my mother is employed. His uncle holds the position of police chief. When Derek desires something to materialize, it does. Keisha stood, clutching her recovered notes. Are you attempting to intimidate me? I am endeavoring to safeguard you. Marcus's voice conveyed genuine apprehension. Last year, there was a young man named Miguel Santos, a transfer student much like yourself. Derek deemed Miguel to be cultivating an overly familiar relationship with a young lady Derek fancied. Miguel subsequently sustained a fractured nose and 3 cracked ribs. He reportedly fell down a flight of stairs. according to the official documentation. And you credit that account? I credit that Miguel transferred educational institutions 2 weeks hence. Marcus leaned in closer. Listen, I comprehend. Standing up feels empowering, but Derek does not engage in equitable combat, and he does not fight alone. Whatever course of action you are contemplating, refrain from it. Before Kesha could articulate a response, Marcus reabsorbed into the throng of students transitioning between classes. The afternoon brought an intensification of the harassment. Someone inadvertently spilled chocolate milk onto her backpack during a lunch. In chemistry laboratory, her safety goggles vanished, compelling her to borrow a scratched pair that rendered precise measurement readings impossible. By the 6th period, a discernible pattern had emerged. Derek's cohort alternated in making her existence difficult, consistently maintaining plausible deniability, always with witnesses who observed accidents, not targeted harassment. However, the 7th period proved to be the breaking point. Kesha occupied her seat in English class, striving to concentrate on the discourse concerning To Kill a Mockingbird when Derek raised his hand. Mrs. Patterson, I believe we should solicit the perspective of our newest student on this novel. I dare say she possesses some genuine insights into its thematic elements. Mrs. Patterson offered an encouraging smile. Keisha, would you care to share your reflections on Harper Lee's depiction of racial inequity? The setup was patently obvious, but Keisha responded with thoughtfulness, elaborating on the novel's exploration of prejudice and moral fortitude. She spoke for 2 minutes, articulating her points with clarity and intelligence. Upon her conclusion, Derek initiated a slow, deliberate clap. Remarkable, that was exceptionally eloquent. You are truly articulate for... He paused, allowing the implication to hang palpably in the air. I mean, it is gratifying to hear someone who can express themselves so lucidly. The classroom fell into a profound silence. Mrs. Patterson's countenance flushed, yet she appeared paralyzed, uncertain how to address the evident racial undertone without exacerbating the situation. Thank you, Keisha responded equably. I appreciate your acknowledgement of my proficiency in effective communication. Derek's smile faltered slightly at her composed retort, but he persisted. It is simply refreshing, you comprehend. Occasionally, individuals from particular backgrounds encounter challenges in academic discourse. The silence grew more oppressive. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I assure you, you will discover that individuals from all backgrounds can be quite surprising, Kesha replied, her voice possessing a steely resolve. When the bell rang, she gathered her books without haste, departing with her head held high. Yet internally, something had solidified. The games had concluded. Derek had just transgressed a boundary that could not be uncrossed. In the corridor she could discern Derek's laughter, mingling with that of his companions, likely congratulating himself on his cunning performance. He possessed no inkling of the force he had just unleashed. Friday morning commenced with Kesha discovering her locker adorned. Someone had affixed a banana to the metal door with a note bearing the inscription, Welcome to the Jungle, in Derek's distinctive script. She removed it expressionlessly, aware of the gathering students observing her reaction. Some exhibited shame, others snickered. Keisha crumpled the note and discarded it in the waste receptacle, but she retained the adhesive tape as evidence. Oh, you did not appreciate your token of appreciation. Derek appeared with his customary retinue, speaking at a volume sufficient for the burgeoning crowd to overhear. I surmised you might be experiencing homesickness for the urban fauna. Creative, Kesha commented, closing her locker with deliberate composure. However, you may wish to refine your penmanship. It renders the source readily identifiable. Derek's jaw tightened. He was unaccustomed to his targets engaging in verbal retort, particularly not in the presence of an audience. Perhaps you require an instructive session on respect. Perhaps you require an instructive session on fundamental human decency. The corridor buzzed with whispered reactions. Students withdrew their phones, sensing the emergence of something more significant. Throughout the morning, the harassment escalated. During physical education, someone had placed itching powder within her athletic apparel. At lunchtime, Jake Wilson intentionally collided with her, causing her tray to crash to the floor. Oops, Jake exclaimed, making no effort to conceal his smirk. "I trust you're not too inept to manage the cleanup." Kesha knelt to collect the scattered sustenance while students navigated around her. A few offered assistance, but she gestured them away. She could manage Derek's contrivances. What she could not endure was the burgeoning audience that seemed to relish the spectacle. The ultimate point of fracture occurred during the 8th period study hall. Kesha sat in isolation at a corner table, engrossed in calculus assignments when Derek and his associates approached. The study hall supervisor had momentarily absented herself, leaving 30 students unsupervised. "Good morning, everyone," Derek announced, his voice permeating the room. "I have something special to share." He withdrew his mobile device and abruptly Kesha's voice filled the room via a compact Bluetooth speaker. It was her English class discussion from the preceding day, but it had been edited and manipulated. Her thoughtful remarks regarding racial injustice had been spliced with audio clips to create the illusion that she was uttering inflammatory statements about Caucasian individuals. The altered recording portrayed her as an irate, prejudiced outsider who harbored animosity towards her new school and everyone within it. Students appeared shocked, bewildered, some incensed. "So, we now comprehend her genuine sentiments towards us," Derek declared, pocketing his device with evident satisfaction. "It is fortunate that we were afforded the opportunity to hear her true perspectives." Kesha remained seated, frozen, as whispers erupted around her. Some students exhibited suspicion, others disgust. A few appeared to recognize the audio as fabricated, but their voices were drowned out by those who accepted it as fact. "That is not what I articulated." Kesha's voice pierced through the cacophony, but Derek spoke over her. "Are you implying I am a fabricator? Everyone present just heard you. Everyone present just heard you manipulate recordings to portray me as something I am not." Derek moved closer to her table. "Why would I find it necessary to manipulate anything? We all heard the nature of the individual you truly are." The study hall door opened and Mrs. Chen, the supervisor, returned. The room fell silent, students suddenly captivated by their academic work. "Is everything satisfactory in here?" Mrs. Chen inquired, sensing the palpable tension. "Perfect," Derek responded with his practiced, politician-like smile, merely engaging in a cordial exchange regarding current affairs. When the bell sounded, Kesha gathered her books with hands that trembled only slightly. Students filed out, some averting their gaze, others staring openly. The damage was done. By tomorrow, Derek's manipulated recording would have disseminated widely across social media platforms. As she proceeded towards her final class, she overheard fragments of conversations. I cannot fathom that she uttered such sentiments. She appeared so subdued and amiable. Derek was accurate in his assessment of her. At her locker after school, Kesha encountered Marcus awaiting her. "That recording was fabricated," he stated quietly. "I was present in the English class. I heard your actual words. It holds no consequence now." Kesha retrieved her jacket. "The harm is inflicted. You could contest it. Prove it was altered. Alternatively, I could confront the originator." Marcus grasped her arm. "Refrain from any rash actions. Derek anticipates your retaliation. He has likely formulated a comprehensive strategy. How to portray you as the instigator, how to secure your suspension or apprehension." Kesha observed Marcus's concerned visage, then the students passing by, some still whispering and gesturing. Derek had systematically executed his campaign to isolate and humiliate her. Every maneuver calculated to provoke a reaction that would legitimize his cruelty. Perhaps it is time to provide him with the outcome he anticipates. She shrugged off Marcus's grasp and proceeded towards the exit. Behind her, Marcus called out, "Kesha, do not undertake this. It is not worth the sacrifice." However, certain things were indeed worth it. Her dignity was worth it. Her entitlement to exist within this institution without enduring constant torment was worth it. And on occasion, the sole method to deter a tormentor was to demonstrate that their intended victim possessed the capacity to retaliate. Outdoors, Derek and his cohort were engaging in boisterous antics in the parking lot, undoubtedly celebrating their successful character assassination. They appeared remarkably self-satisfied, exuding an unwavering confidence in their authority. Keisha deposited her backpack near the school entrance and advanced towards them with determined purpose. It was time to engage in that dialogue Derek had repeatedly alluded to, but this instance it would unfold on her terms. Derek was still chuckling about the recording when he observed Keisha approaching across the parking lot. His laughter subsided as he noted her purposeful gait, the manner in which she had dropped her backpack as if it were dead weight. Well, well, observe who has finally decided to engage in conversation. Derek straightened, Jake and Tommy automatically flanking him, prepared to offer an apology for their earlier unfriendliness. Keisha halted approximately 10 feet away, her voice calm and resonant. I have concluded my participation in your charades, Derek. The fabricated recording, the incessant harassment, all of it. This concludes presently. Oh, it concludes when I decree it concludes. Derek's self-assurance swelled, bolstered by his audience. A few students had paused their activities to observe, sensing impending drama. You presume you can simply infiltrate my establishment and exhibit disrespect towards me? Reconsider your assumptions. Your establishment? Kesha advanced a step closer. Last I recalled, this was a public institution sustained by the contributions of taxpayers, including my mother. Derek's expression darkened. Do not presume to display insolence towards me. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Depart while the opportunity remains feasible. I attempted to depart. You pursued. I endeavored to disregard you. You escalated. I sought a rational resolution. Another step closer. Now, we shall proceed according to my methodology. Tommy cracked his knuckles. Are you certain you wish to proceed thusly? 3 against 1 does not present a favorable appearance for your standing. Neither does preying upon someone you believed incapable of defending themselves. Keisha's voice remained steady, but her posture shifted subtly. Her weight was balanced on the balls of her feet. Final opportunity, Derek. Agree to cease your harassment of me. And this does not need to devolve into unpleasantness. Derek emitted a harsh laugh that cut through the afternoon air. You are exceedingly amusing. What actions do you intend to undertake? Summon your maternal guardian? I shall provide you with precisely what you have been soliciting. The instant Derek reached for her arm, Kesha reacted. Her training engaged with fluid precision. She expertly extricated herself from his grasp, secured his wrist, and utilized his own momentum to cause him to stumble. Before he could regain his equilibrium, her elbow made forceful contact with his solar plexus, causing him to double over. Jake lunged next, swinging with unbridled anger. Kesha ducked, executed a leg sweep, and sent him sprawling onto the asphalt. Tommy hesitated, suddenly realizing this encounter was not unfolding according to the anticipated script. Derek straightened, breathing heavily but consumed by fury. You believe yourself to be formidable? Let us ascertain your true mettle. What ensued was a display of brutal efficiency. Derek possessed physical stature and unbridled rage, but Kesha commanded skill and 8 years of disciplined training. She moved with aqueous grace around his clumsy attempts to grab or strike her, delivering precise blows whenever opportunities presented themselves. Jake and Tommy persistently attempted to intercede, but only succeeded in impeding Derek's progress or finding themselves on the receiving end of Kesha's defensive strikes. The altercation migrated across the parking lot as Derek continued to charge, continued to swing, and continued to stubbornly refuse to be subdued. By the conclusion, Derek lay supine on the asphalt with Keisha's knee positioned between his shoulder blades. They had traversed nearly half a block. Derek's nose bled profusely. Jake nursed a swollen eye and Tommy gingerly held his ribs. Are we concluded? Keisha inquired, her breathing controlled despite the physical exertion. Release me, Derek gasped. Are we concluded? She repeated, applying a slight degree of pressure. Very well, we are concluded. You shall cease your pursuit of me. All 3 of you. No further stratagems, no continued harassment, no manipulated recordings. Is that understood? Yes, it is understood. Kesha released him and stepped back, observing as Derek rolled over and sat up, blood trickling from his nose. The small assembly of onlookers stood in stunned silence. "A constructive discussion," she remarked, then proceeded back towards the school to retrieve her backpack. Meanwhile, within the building, Principal Martinez was finalizing documentation when her secretary knocked. "Mrs. Martinez, there has been some sort of altercation in the parking lot. Students are indicating that a fight occurred." Principal Martinez sighed and reached for her coat. "How severe?" "Well, no one has summoned an ambulance, but you may wish to witness this firsthand." As the head administrator hurried out, she observed Derek Morrison dabbing at a wound on his face while Jake and Tommy assisted him upright. A group of students milled nearby, their phones activated, a lively buzz of conversation filling the atmosphere. "What transpired here?" Principal Martinez inquired sternly. "Nothing," Derek mumbled, refusing to meet her gaze. "Just horsing around." "Derek Morrison, you're injured. That is not horsing around." "I stumbled," Derek stated swiftly. "I wasn't paying adequate attention. I tripped over my own extremities." Principal Martinez appeared unconvinced. However, before she could probe further, Derek and his companions were departing, Derek heavily reliant on Jake for support. The subsequent morning, the whispers had already transformed into full-blown myths. Some asserted Kesha had employed instruments. Others claimed she had bested 5 males. The actual event was sufficiently remarkable, but high school gossip had never been constrained by verifiable facts. During the second academic period, Jessica Martinez, a sophomore brimming with nervous energy, approached Kesha at her storage compartment, her friend Amber close behind. "Greetings," Jessica said softly, surveying her surroundings to ensure their conversation remained private. "May we converse with you regarding a matter?" Kesha studied the 2 young women. Jessica's expression conveyed fear mingled with resolve. Amber seemed poised to flee at the slightest indication of peril. "What is occurring?" "We overheard about yesterday's incident with Derek and his associates," Jessica elaborated, "and we were pondering, would you consider assisting us with something comparable?" "Comparable? In what manner?" Amber finally interjected, her voice barely audible. "There are some lads from Riverside High. They have been accosting us at the bus stop following school yesterday. She faltered, glancing at Jessica. "They pilfered Amber's satchel and scattered its contents everywhere." Jessica completed the sentence. "They insulted her with truly vile epithets. They declared they would return today to continue their discourse." Kesha secured her storage compartment and turned to face them fully. "Precisely, what are you requesting that I do? Would you accompany us to the bus stop today?" Jessica's voice wavered between apprehension and anticipation. "Perhaps if they perceive your presence, they will cease bothering us." Kesha observed their apprehensive visages and reflected on Derek's wounded nose, the doctored recording, and every minor indignity that had culminated in yesterday's confrontation. "At what hour does your transport arrive?" "At 3:15. Kesha proceeded to the bus stop on Maple Street with Jessica and Amber. The afternoon sun cast elongated shadows between the residences, and a gentle breeze stirred the foliage overhead. The 2 girls remained in close proximity to her, their nervous energy almost palpable. "They typically appear around 3:20, Jessica whispered, consulting her mobile device. "The transport does not arrive until 3:45, so they have ample time to what, precisely?" Kesha inquired. Amber's voice trembled slightly. "Yesterday, they encircled us. They remarked that we appeared solitary and required companionship. When I attempted to depart, one of them seized my arm and proclaimed I was being discourteous. Then they emptied my satchel and compelled us to retrieve everything while they observed." Jessica added, "They stated that if we reported them, they would ensure we regretted it." Kesha nodded, her gaze sweeping the thoroughfare. "How many?" 3. Brad is the ringleader, tall fellow with bleached hair. Connor has the sleeve tattoos, and Tyler is the one who grabbed Amber. Precisely. At 3:22, a dilapidated Camaro turned onto Maple Street, its audio system blaring. The vehicle decelerated as it approached the bus stop, and 3 individuals disembarked with the swagger of those who believed they owned the vicinity. Brad noticed Kesha immediately. his gaze narrowing in bewilderment. "Who is the new individual?" "Nobody," Jessica stated rapidly. "Just awaiting the bus." Connor chuckled, showcasing the intricate designs adorning his forearms. "Appears like somebody to me. Appears like somebody who does not belong in this vicinity." Tyler advanced toward Amber, who instinctively retreated behind Kesha. "Did you bring reinforcements, sweetheart?" "That is not particularly amicable." "Actually," Kesha declared, her voice resonating clearly in the hushed street, "I am here to engage in a discussion with the three of you." Brad's eyebrows ascended. "A discussion concerning what?" "Concerning how you will cease bothering these young women from this point forward." The three youths exchanged glances before erupting in laughter. Connor wiped his eyes dramatically. "Oh, that is amusing." "The reinforcements consist of a single young woman who fancies herself formidable." "I do not fancy anything," Kesha responded composedly. "I am merely informing you that your harassment concludes today." Tyler moved even closer to Amber, deliberately invading her personal space. "And what if we are disinclined to conclude anything?" "Then you will discover that certain individuals do not make convenient targets." Brad maneuvered to Kesha's left flank, while Connor occupied the right. "You know what? I like you. You possess spirit. Why do you not abandon these failures and associate with genuine men?" "I am not interested in associating with youths who terrorize children." "Children?" Tyler's tone became hostile. "These are not children. They are old enough to learn some deference." He extended his hand to grasp Amber's shoulder, and that is when Kesha reacted. Her left hand intercepted Tyler's outstretched arm, deflecting it away from Amber, while her right hand struck his wrist. Tyler yelped and recoiled, cradling his arm. "What the—" Connor initiated a forward movement, but Kesha had already shifted her position. "Final admonition," she stated, her posture balanced and prepared. "Withdraw." Instead, Brad charged from her left while Connor advanced from the right. Kesha dropped low, sweeping Brad's legs out from under him while simultaneously pivoting to strike Connor with an elbow to his midsection. Both youths landed forcefully on the ground. Tyler, still tending to his wrist, retrieved his mobile device. "You insane sorceress! I am summoning the authorities." "Proceed," Kesha stated without averting her gaze from Brad and Connor, who were struggling to regain their footing. "Inform them that 3 high school youths were subdued while attempting to assault 2 younger females. I am confident that will be perceived favorably." From behind her mobile device, Jessica had been documenting the entire encounter. "I have captured everything," she declared, her voice now more assured, "including the instance where Tyler attempted to grab Amber." Brad dabbed at the blood from his split lip, glaring at Kesha with a mixture of newfound respect and resentment. "You have no comprehension of whom you are antagonizing. 3 cowards who prey on females smaller than themselves. Indeed, I possess a reasonably accurate understanding." Connor limped back toward the vehicle, his swagger of defiance completely diminished. "This is not concluded." "Yes, it is," Kesha affirmed firmly. "If I observe any of you near these young women again, our subsequent discourse will not be so courteous." Tyler began to speak, but Brad grasped his arm. "Come along, let us depart." As the Camaro sped away with squealing tires, Jessica lowered her mobile device with trembling hands. "Oh my goodness, that was astonishing." "Are you both unharmed?" Kesha inquired, her attention returning to the young women. Amber nodded, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Thank you. I cannot fathom you undertook that." "They were counting on you being too apprehensive to retaliate," Kesha remarked. "Bullies consistently rely on that." The transport rounded the bend, its brakes hissing as it approached the stop. As they boarded, Jessica was already uploading the footage to her social media platforms. "Everyone needs to witness this," she exclaimed enthusiastically. "Everyone needs to be aware that someone has finally confronted these scoundrels." Kesha settled into a seat, oblivious to the fact that Jessica's footage would be shared hundreds of times before supper, propelling her from local notoriety to a widespread sensation overnight. By 7:00 p.m., Jessica's footage had been disseminated more than 300 times. By 9:00 p.m., it had reached 1,000. The accompanying text read, Young woman confronts aggressors harassing students at bus stop. Finally, someone fights back. Responses flooded in from students across 3 educational districts. Accounts of harassment, intimidation, and mistreatment that had been whispered about in hallways suddenly found an open forum. This is the young woman who also subdued Derek Morrison. About time someone confronted the Riverside contingent. She ought to conduct self-defense instruction. Concurrently, across town, Derek Morrison was seated in his chamber with an ice pack pressed to his still swollen nasal appendage, viewing the footage for the 5th occasion. His mobile device buzzed with alerts. Friends forwarded him the link, inquiring if this was the same young woman who had humiliated him. "This cannot be transpiring," he muttered, scrolling through the comments. Someone had already connected the pieces, posting about his own encounter with Kesha in the school parking area. His mobile device rang. Jake's designation illuminated the screen. "Are you witnessing this?" Jake's voice was strained with indignation. "Everyone is witnessing this. My father is already posing inquiries as to why I appear as if I was struck by a vehicle." "She is making us appear like complete fools." Initially us, now the Riverside individuals. Individuals are referring to her as some sort of savior. Derek's jaw tightened. She is not a savior. She was simply fortunate on 2 occasions. At the same juncture in Riverside, Brad Matthews was engaged in a comparable dialogue with his cadre. "How did we appear so feeble?" Connor demanded, pacing his garage while Tyler cradled his still aching wrist. 3 of us against 1 young woman, and we were vanquished because she possessed combat proficiency and we did not anticipate it," Brad stated, though his voice lacked conviction. Tyler reopened the footage. "Observe this. She does not even appear fatigued afterward, and now everyone is labeling us as cowards and aggressors." "We are aggressors," Connor interjected. "That is the point. Fear maintains order among individuals. But if word disseminates that some high school young woman can incapacitate us, our reputation is ruined," Brad concluded. "Nobody will respect us after this." Back at Millbrook High, the viral footage was generating a different kind of disarray. Students who had endured in silence were suddenly discovering their voices. Principal Martinez arrived at school on Monday morning to discover her voicemail inundated with messages from guardians. Some demanded Kesha's expulsion for aggression. Others lauded her for safeguarding their offspring. Most desired to ascertain why the institution was not already addressing the harassment their offspring had been reporting. Her secretary, Mrs. Chen, presented her with a compilation of incident reports that had been submitted over the weekend. 12 students came forward with allegations of harassment. All of them mentioned observing the footage and determining they could no longer remain silent. Principal Martinez perused the reports, her expression growing more troubled with each page. "How did we remain unaware of this? Some of these occurrences transpired off campus. Others, well, the students assert they reported them, but no action was taken." During the first academic period, Kesha found herself surrounded by students eager to express their gratitude, pose inquiries, or simply be in the proximity of someone who had stood up to the established order that had failed them. "You are like a genuine life action protagonist," stated a sophomore named Danny, whose own report detailed months of harassment by senior students. "I am not a protagonist," Kesha responded. "I simply grew weary of being subjected to intimidation." Yet, even as students celebrated her conduct, the administration was hastily attempting to control the narrative. Principal Martinez convened an urgent assembly with the school board, where the discussion swiftly devolved into damage limitation. "The incident occurred off school grounds," Board President Walsh insisted. "We can distance ourselves from this entirely." "Can we?" Principal Martinez displayed the footage on her laptop. "Because half the comments pertain to how our institution possesses a bullying issue that we have been neglecting." Board member Johnson leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that perhaps we should attend to what these students are articulating rather than concerning ourselves with our public image." The assembly became animated as board members deliberated whether to support Kesha or impose a suspension upon her for engaging in combat. Meanwhile, a parental petition was circulating online demanding that the school implement self-defense instruction and enhanced protection for students. By lunchtime, over 50 students had enrolled in a support group organized by Jessica. The group's objective was straightforward: to cultivate a secure environment for students who had encountered harassment and to advocate for more robust protective policies. As Kesha traversed the corridors, she observed the alteration in the atmosphere. Students who had once averted their gazes now offered respectful nods. Educators who had previously overlooked subtle harassment were suddenly more vigilant. However, she also noticed Derek and his companions observing her with undisguised animosity. And she understood that while she had triumphed in 2 skirmishes, the conflict was far from concluded. The viral footage had furnished her with a platform and a following, but it had also affixed a target upon her back that was larger than ever. Tuesday morning, Kesha was summoned to the principal's office prior to the first academic period. Principal Martinez was seated behind her desk with the strained expression of someone who had been awake excessively long, dealing with telephone communications. "Kindly be seated," Principal Martinez gestured to the chair opposite her. "We must deliberate upon what transpired at the bus stop." Students were being subjected to harassment. I assisted them by engaging in physical confrontation off school property. Principal Martinez opened a dossier on her desk. "I've received 17 calls from guardians since yesterday. Some desire your expulsion, others wish you to be awarded a medal. The school board is convening this evening to determine how to address this situation." Kesha maintained a steady tone. "Address what situation?" "I defended 2 students from assault. You subdued 3 youths and disseminated it online. I did not disseminate anything, and those youths were terrorizing students from this institution." Principal Martinez rubbed her temples. "Kesha, I comprehend your frustration, but vigilantism is not the solution. We possess procedures." "Protocols?" "Your procedures did not prevent Derek Morrison from harassing me for a week. Your protocols did not shield Jessica and Amber from being seized and threatened." "That is not—" Principal Martinez began, then paused. "Listen, I am endeavoring to assist you. The school board desires this matter to be resolved discreetly. If you consent to cease the physical interventions, we can likely avert a suspension. And if I do not consent, then we will be compelled to contemplate more severe repercussions." Kesha stood. "Is that all?" "Kindly reflect upon my words. This course you are pursuing is not sustainable." As Kesha exited the office, she found Danny and 3 other students awaiting her in the corridor. "We overheard you were summoned," Danny stated nervously. "Are you in difficulty?" "Perhaps." Kesha began walking towards her storage compartment. "Why?" "Because we wish to inquire something of you." Danny hastened to keep pace with her. "A number of us were conversing, and we were pondering. Would you instruct us in what you know?" Kesha ceased walking. "Instruct you in what?" "How to retaliate, how to defend ourselves." Danny's voice grew stronger. "I have been subjected to intimidation since 7th grade. Yesterday, for the first time, no one bothered me. They are all apprehensive that you might be observing." "That will not persist indefinitely." "Precisely. That is why we must acquire the ability to protect ourselves." A young woman named Sarah stepped forward. "My elder sibling attends Riverside. He states that those youths you encountered are formulating a plan. They are embarrassed and incensed." "What sort of plan?" "He declined to specify, but he cautioned me to be cautious when walking home." Meanwhile, in the gymnasium office, Coach Rodriguez was engaged in his own challenging discussion with Principal Martinez. "You wish me to prohibit her from utilizing the gymnasium?" Coach Rodriguez crossed his arms. "For what reason?" "For establishing an unauthorized martial arts program. Parents are referring to it as a fight club. Have you observed what she is actually doing? She is instructing youngsters in self-defense, fundamental techniques, confidence enhancement. It is precisely what half these students require." Principal Martinez sighed. "The insurance liability alone is less than what we will face when one of these harassment incidents escalates into something more severe." Coach Rodriguez leaned forward. "Sarah, I've been teaching here for 12 years. I've never witnessed students as actively engaged in physical fitness as they have been this week. The school board does not perceive it in that manner. Then perhaps the school board needs to dedicate some time in the corridors observing how these students interact, now observing how the bullies are suddenly discovering alternative pursuits. That afternoon, Kesha arrived at the gymnasium to find 30 students awaiting her. Word had disseminated despite the administration's apprehensions. Students who had never conversed with each other were united by shared encounters of harassment and a desire to alter their circumstances. "I conferred with Principal Martinez," Kesha announced. "The school board does not desire us to convene here." Disappointed murmurs rippled through the assembly. "However," Kesha continued, "this is technically after school hours, and Coach Rodriguez has granted us authorization to utilize the space." Coach Rodriguez emerged from his office. "As far as I am concerned, this is a fitness club focused on self-defense and confidence enhancement, entirely within school regulations." The students erupted in cheers, but Kesha raised her hand for silence. "Before we commence, everyone must comprehend something. This is not about engaging in combat. This is about possessing the skills and confidence to safeguard yourself and others. We do not seek out trouble, but we do not flee from it either." As she began instructing basic defensive postures, she observed Derek and Jake watching through the gymnasium's glass portals. Their expressions mingled anger with something that might have been apprehension. Derek turned to Jake. "Observe them. She is assembling an army. What do we do about it?" Derek's smile was frigid. "We ensure everyone comprehends that actions carry repercussions." Inside the gymnasium, students practice breaking free from wrist grasps and verbal de-escalation techniques, unaware that their newfound confidence was being perceived as a direct threat by those who had profited from their fear. By Friday, Kesha's self-defense program had expanded to include over 60 students. The corner of the gymnasium buzzed with activity as teenagers practiced escaping holds, cultivating self-assurance, and learning to project strength through their demeanor. "Remember," Kesha called out to the group, "the objective is always to de-escalate and depart safely. Combat is the final recourse, not the initial option." Sarah, who had been quiet and withdrawn merely a week prior, now stood straighter as she practiced defensive maneuvers. "I cannot comprehend how differently I feel," she informed Danny during a hydration break, "as if I truly possess some dominion over what transpires to me." "Likewise," Danny responded, wiping perspiration from his brow. "Yesterday, when those seniors attempted to provoke me in the corridor, I simply met their gaze and continued walking. They retreated," Coach Rodriguez observed from his office, taking notes for his report to Principal Martinez. The transformation in these students was remarkable, not merely physically, but in their entire bearing. They walked with great confidence, spoke with increased assurance, and seemed to support each other in ways he had never witnessed before. But while the program flourished within the gymnasium, external forces were mobilizing against it. That same Friday evening, Derek Morrison was seated in his vehicle in the parking area of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, awaiting. His nose had healed, but his pride remained fractured. The footage of his humiliation had been viewed over 10,000 times, with comments that unsettled his stomach. At 8:30, a dilapidated Camaro pulled into the parking space adjacent to his. Brad Matthews disembarked, followed by Connor and Tyler. All three appeared as enraged and frustrated as Derek felt. "You took your time," Derek remarked as they slid into the booth opposite him and Jake. "Had to ensure no one followed us," Brad replied, his voice strained. "Cannot afford any more footage going viral." Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "I still believe this is a poor notion. What if someone discovers we are collaborating?" "Nobody will discover," Derek snapped, "unless you intend to blab." Connor leaned forward. "Look, we all face the same predicament. This young woman made us appear weak, and now everyone believes they can confront us. Our reputations are in tatters." "It is worse than that," Jake added. "She is instructing other youths in combat. Yesterday, a freshman student actually stood their ground when I attempted to provoke him. A freshman, no less." Tyler nodded, a scowl of anger on his face. "The same phenomenon is occurring at our own school. Students who used to readily surrender their lunch money are suddenly developing backbone. Derek produced his mobile device and displayed a video from that afternoon's training session. 60 students. She's got 60 students learning self-defense. In roughly 1 month, that number will be 100. So what's your strategy? Brad inquired. Derek's smile was chilling and calculating. We can't physically confront her anymore. There are far too many witnesses and an abundance of surveillance cameras. However, we can dismantle her reputation through legal channels. How? Charges of assault. My father has connections within the justice system. We'll lodge formal complaints with the police, alleging she attacked us without provocation, resulting in her arrest, expulsion, and potentially even commitment to a juvenile detention facility. Connor furrowed his brow. But there's video evidence of what truly transpired. Videos can be misconstrued, Derek stated smoothly, particularly when you have competent legal representation to interpret them for a judge. My father has already consulted with our family's legal counsel. What about the bus stop incident? Tyler asked. That footage is ubiquitous. 3 high school males against 1 female. We'll assert she was armed and that we were acting in self-defense. Who would believe we were actually attempting to harm those sophomore girls? Jake nodded slowly. And once she's apprehended, her little combat club will dissolve. The students will revert to their former timidity and will regain control. Brad appeared unconvinced. This could backfire. What if people dismiss our claims? They won't, Derek declared with unwavering confidence, because my family wields significant influence in this town, whereas hers does not, because we are the injured parties here, not her. The 6 young men dedicated the subsequent hour to devising their scheme. They would synchronize their narratives, submit complaints concurrently, and present a unified front, asserting that Kesha Williams was a dangerous individual who had assaulted innocent students without any provocation. Meanwhile, back at the school, Kesha was concluding her training session, entirely oblivious to the legal predicament being orchestrated against her. Same time Monday, Sarah inquired as the students collected their belongings. Absolutely, Kesha responded. And remember to practice your situational awareness throughout the weekend. Trust your instincts. As the students departed, animatedly discussing their advancements, Coach Rodriguez approached Kesha. You've accomplished something remarkable here, he commented quietly. These students are transformed, more resolute. They were always strong, Kesha replied. They simply needed to be reminded of it. Be cautious, though. Such transformation invariably unsettles certain individuals, particularly those who benefit from the established order. Kesha nodded, gathering her own possessions. She had perceived the escalating tension throughout the week. The way Derek and his associates observed her, the hushed discussions that ceased upon her approach, the pervasive sense that something was brewing just beneath the surface. What she failed to realize was that the storm was poised to break, and it would test not only her combat prowess but also her belief in the very concept of justice. Monday morning, Dr. Patricia Williams received the call that irrevocably altered everything. She was reviewing patient records at the hospital when her phone rang, displaying an unknown caller ID. Dr. Williams, this is Sergeant Hayes with the Millbrook Police Department. We require you to accompany your daughter to the station. Patricia's blood ran cold. Is Kesha injured? What has happened? She is unharmed, ma'am. However, assault charges have been filed against her. We need to bring her in for questioning. Assault charges? That's preposterous. My daughter would never. Ma'am, we have 6 complainants. I strongly advise you to seek legal counsel. Patricia's hands trembled as she contacted Kesha's school, then her own supervisor, to request an emergency leave of absence. By the time she arrived at Millbrook High, police officers were already present in the principal's office. Principal Martinez appeared distressed as she elucidated the situation. 6 young men from 2 separate educational institutions have lodged formal complaints alleging that Kesha attacked them without any provocation. That is absurd, Patricia asserted firmly. My daughter was defending herself and protecting other students. The complainants present a contrary account, Sergeant Hayes stated, consulting his notes. They contend that she has systematically targeted and assaulted male students. They are requesting restraining orders. When Kesha was summoned to the office, her composed demeanor faltered for the first time since her transfer to Millbrook. Witnessing her mother's anxious expression and the stern visage of the police officer, she comprehended that Derek's reprisal had manifested in a way she had not anticipated. "Am I under arrest?" she inquired softly. "Not presently," Sergeant Hayes replied. "However, you must accompany us to the station for questioning. Your mother may accompany you." As news spread throughout the school that Kesha had been taken into police custody, the student body erupted into an organized upheaval. Jessica Martinez burst into tears upon hearing the development. "This is my fault," she sobbed to Sarah. "If I hadn't published that video." "No," Sarah declared with conviction, surprising even herself with her newfound fortitude. "This is Derek's fault and Brad's and all the other tormentors who cannot tolerate the fact that someone has finally stood up to them." Within the span of an hour, students were mobilizing. Danny established a group chat named Justice for Kesha, which rapidly swelled to encompass over 200 members in 30 minutes. Videos from the bus stop encounter were reshared, accompanied by detailed explanations of the actual events. Marcus Thompson, who had previously attempted to alert Kesha weeks prior, now found himself leading an impromptu demonstration in the school cafeteria. "They are attempting to ruin her for safeguarding us," he announced to anyone willing to listen, "for empowering us with the courage to defend ourselves." Concurrently, at the police station, Kesha occupied an interrogation room alongside her mother and the court-appointed legal counsel Patricia had hastily secured. "Recount precisely what transpired," the attorney Ms. Rodriguez instructed, "commencing with your initial day at school." Kesha narrated the entire sequence of events: Derek's demand for protection money, the escalating harassment, the manipulated audio recording, the confrontation in the parking lot, and the bus stop incident. Her mother listened with mounting indignation as details emerged that Kesha had never previously divulged. "Why did you not inform me of this?" Patricia inquired, her voice laced with hurt. "Because I believed I could manage it independently, and because I knew that if you complained to the school, it would only exacerbate the situation." Ms. Rodriguez meticulously documented the information. "Do you possess any corroborating evidence of this harassment?" "Some items, yes. I photographed alterations made to my locker. There might be security footage capturing certain occurrences." Back at school, Coach Rodriguez was engaged in a similarly impassioned dialogue with Principal Martinez. "You're aware this is unjust," he stated, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "You have witnessed the positive impact that young woman has had on our students, the self-assurance she has instilled in them, the manner in which she has enabled them to assert themselves." "My hands are bound," Principal Martinez responded. 6 families have submitted complaints. The school board is operating in crisis mode because their primary concern is avoiding litigation rather than upholding what is right." Coach Rodriguez: "No. Allow me to finish. I've observed Derek Morrison and his companions terrorizing students for years. I've submitted reports, recommended interventions, and proposed disciplinary actions. And what has been the outcome? Nothing. But one young woman challenges them, and suddenly everyone expresses concern about violence in schools." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Mrs. Chen entered, appearing overwhelmed. "Principal Martinez, there are approximately 50 students in the main hallway holding protest signs. They are demanding that Kesha's charges be dropped." "Signs? What sort of signs?" "Justice for Kesha. Cease protecting bullies. She defended us. And parents are arriving as well. Numerous parents." Principal Martinez closed her eyes. "Contact the president of the school board. Inform him that we are facing a significant situation." As the demonstration outside escalated, Dr. Williams sat beside her daughter at the police station, witnessing her child confront repercussions for possessing the fortitude to challenge injustice. "Whatever transpires," Patricia whispered, "I am immensely proud of you." Kesha squeezed her mother's hand, acutely aware that the struggle for her liberty was only just beginning, yet also recognizing that she was no longer contending alone. 2 weeks hence, on the eve of the trial, Kesha sat at her kitchen table, meticulously reviewing her testimony with Ms. Rodriguez. The attorney had evolved into a formidable advocate, working pro bono after scrutinizing the evidence of systematic harassment. "Remember," Ms. Rodriguez advised, tapping her pen against her legal notepad. Adhere strictly to the facts. Do not permit their counsel to provoke you into an emotional outburst. That is precisely their objective. What if the judge does not believe me? Keisha asked, articulating the apprehension that had plagued her sleepless nights. Then we shall appeal. However, I suspect you will be pleasantly surprised by the extent of the support you command. Dr. Williams entered the kitchen, bearing a box filled with printed electronic correspondences. These are solely from today, she remarked, setting it down with a palpable weight. Letters of endorsement from parents, students, and even educators from other institutions who have become aware of the case. Ms. Rodriguez offered a smile. The prosecutor's office is receiving comparable correspondence. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly in your favor. Across town, Derek Morrison was engaged in a markedly different exchange with his father's legal representative, Mr. Blackwood, an impeccably attired gentleman with cold eyes and an ostentatious timepiece. I want you to grasp something unequivocally, Blackwood stated, his voice cutting through the palpable tension in the Morrison family's drawing room. If any discrepancies surface in your testimony tomorrow, this entire legal proceeding will collapse. Derek shifted uncomfortably. There will be no inconsistencies. There absolutely must not be. Because should it emerge that you have deliberately misled this court, charges of filing a false police report will constitute the least of your apprehensions. Falsifying official documents is a felony offense. Jake and Tommy exchanged apprehensive glances from their positions on the plush leather sofa. The gravity of their actions was beginning to register as the trial loomed closer. What about the video evidence? Tommy inquired weakly. People will witness what truly transpired. Videos can be taken out of context, Blackwood replied with practiced smoothness. That is precisely why we are emphasizing the alleged pattern of violent conduct. 6 separate alleged incidents make it more challenging to convincingly argue self-defense. Meanwhile, Brad Matthews was confronting his own crisis of confidence at an emergency gathering of the Riverside Boys. I'm beginning to suspect we may have made an error in judgment, Tyler remarked, pacing agitatedly within Connor's garage. What if they possess evidence we are unaware of? Such as what? Brad retorted sharply, but his voice lacked its customary assurance. Security cameras, eyewitnesses, I have no definitive notion. But this entire affair seems to be escalating beyond our control. Connor nodded gravely. My father asserts that if we lose this case, we could face charges of perjury. He is contemplating retaining independent legal counsel. Your father is wise to be concerned, Tyler observed, because I learned something significant today. Apparently, approximately 20 students are slated to testify on her behalf tomorrow. Back at Millbrook High, those 20 students were convening in the school library for a final preparatory session meticulously organized by Marcus Thompson and Jessica Martinez. Remember, Marcus addressed the assembly, simply recount the factual truth regarding what you observed and experienced. Avoid embellishment. Do not introduce details about which you are uncertain. Sarah raised her hand. What if they attempt to discredit us and portray us as deceitful? Then we shall maintain our composure and remain steadfast in our accounts, Jessica responded, because our accounts are verifiably true. Danny nodded with firm resolve. I have endured harassment from Derek for 3 years. Tomorrow I will finally have the opportunity to articulate to an authoritative figure what that experience has entailed. Coach Rodriguez, who had been discreetly observing from the rear of the room, stepped forward. I wish for all of you to comprehend the profound pride I feel in your courage. To present oneself in a courtroom requires the same caliber of bravery that Kesha demonstrated in that parking lot. Will you also be providing testimony, Coach? Sarah inquired. I will, and so will Principal Martinez, although she is currently unaware of this intention. The group regarded him with surprise. Marcus furrowed his brow. She is going to testify in support of Kesha? She is going to testify regarding the harassment reports that were submitted and subsequently disregarded, the pattern of behavior that precipitated this situation. Ms. Rodriguez formally subpoenaed her this afternoon. As the meeting concluded, students exchanged embraces, bidding farewell, fully cognizant that the following day would determine not only Keisha's destiny, but also the future trajectory of their school's prevailing culture. That evening, Keisha lay awake, gazing at the ceiling, reflecting on all that had culminated in this pivotal moment. 8 months prior, she had been a reticent student in Detroit, diligently focusing on her training regimen and her academic pursuits. Now she found herself at the epicenter of a legal conflict that had bifurcated her nascent community. Her mobile device vibrated with an incoming text message from Jessica. "Whatever occurs tomorrow, you have fundamentally altered the dynamics here. Thank you." Similar messages had been arriving throughout the evening from students she had assisted, parents whose children had discovered their voices, and even strangers who had witnessed the viral videos and been inspired by her courage. At 2 in the morning, she finally succumbed to sleep, acutely aware that in 8 hours she would enter that courtroom, carrying the collective hopes and anxieties of every individual who had ever been subjected to bullying, everyone who had ever been instructed to remain silent, everyone who held the conviction that standing firm for what is right was an endeavor worth the inherent risk. The trial would determine her legal standing. However, the true adjudication had already been rendered by her community. She had imparted to them the courage to believe in the efficacy of justice. The Millbrook County Courthouse throbbed with palpable tension as supporters occupied every available seat. Students, parents, and community members had arrived exceptionally early, forming a queue that extended around the perimeter of the building. Judge Patricia Thompson, a formidable woman in her 50s, formally convened the court at precisely 9 in the morning. The state versus Kesha Williams. Charges include assault in the second degree, she proclaimed. "Mr. Blackwood, you may proceed with your opening statement." Derek's attorney stood with an air of unshakable confidence, his expensive suit exuding an aura of authority. "Your Honor, this case centers on a pattern of unprovoked aggression perpetrated by the defendant against 6 unsuspecting young men. We shall endeavor to demonstrate that Kesha Williams systematically targeted and assaulted my clients, inflicting both physical harm and profound emotional distress." He gestured toward Derek, who sat with his head bowed, feigning victimhood. These young men were merely navigating their daily lives when they became targets of the defendant's belligerence. The evidence presented will incontrovertibly establish that she is a dangerous individual who exploits her martial arts proficiency to intimidate and harm others. Ms. Rodriguez arose to present the defense's case, her voice resonating with clarity and strength. "Your Honor, what we are confronting here is not a scenario of unprovoked assault, but rather a young woman acting in self-defense against systematic harassment and relentless bullying. The evidence will unequivocally demonstrate that every action taken by my client was a direct response to escalating threats and actual physical aggression initiated by the complainants." The prosecution called Derek to the stand first. He ascended with a calculated display of nervousness, recounting a fabricated narrative of events wherein Kesha had aggressively approached him in the cafeteria. "I was merely attempting to be cordial to the new student," Derek testified, his voice wavering with manufactured emotion. "I offered to show her around, to assist her in integrating. Instead, she became hostile and issued threats." "And what transpired in the parking lot?" Blackwood prompted. "She cornered me and my friends after school. We attempted to depart, but she pursued us. When I endeavored to de-escalate the situation, she launched an unprovoked attack." Ms. Rodriguez approached for cross-examination. "Mr. Morrison, is it not accurate that you demanded protection money from my client on her inaugural day?" "I possess no knowledge of your implication." "Furthermore, is it not also true that you fabricated an altered audio recording with the explicit intent to humiliate her in the presence of other students?" Derek's composure faltered perceptibly. "I never manipulated any recording. We shall ascertain the veracity of that claim." Ms. Rodriguez turned to address the judge. "Your Honor, I respectfully request to present Defense Exhibit A." The courtroom fell into a profound silence as the original unedited recording of Kesha's English class discussion played through the auditory system, immediately followed by Derek's deliberately distorted version. The disparity was stark and beyond any reasonable doubt. Derek's face flushed a deep crimson as murmurs rippled through the assembled spectators. That was merely a jest that you strategically employed to demean my client in front of 30 students. Objection, Blackwood exclaimed, but the damage was irretrievably done. The prosecution's case proceeded with Jake and Tommy offering similarly fabricated accounts, but their narratives began to unravel under meticulous cross-examination. Tommy provided contradictory information regarding Jake's timeline, and Jake was unable to provide a coherent explanation for security footage that clearly depicted them harassing other students on the very days they claimed to be victims. When Brad Matthews took the stand representing the interests of the Riverside boys, his testimony disintegrated even more rapidly. "So you are asserting before this court," Ms. Rodriguez inquired, "that 3 high school males were intimidated by a single young woman at a bus stop?" "She was aggressive," Brad mumbled. "Aggressive? Or perhaps defending 2 younger students from harassment." Ms. Rodriguez then played Jessica's unedited video recording, which unambiguously illustrated Brad and his companions issuing threats to the girls prior to Kesha's intervention. The defense commenced with Marcus Thompson, whose testimony regarding Derek's 3-year campaign of bullying was devastatingly effective. Student after student ascended the witness stand, each eloquently describing incidents of harassment that collectively painted a vivid and undeniable picture of systematic intimidation. Jessica's deeply emotional testimony concerning the bus stop incident moved several jurors to tears. "Tyler seized my friend's arm as she attempted to walk away. We were terrified and outnumbered. Keisha intervened and saved us." Sarah's testimony was equally impactful. Derek and his associates transformed the school into a waking nightmare for anyone they arbitrarily chose to target. Kesha provided us with hope that someone would finally confront them. Principal Martinez's reluctant testimony concerning the ignored harassment reports and the school's systemic failure to adequately protect its students added significant institutional weight to the defense's case. Finally, Kesha herself took the witness stand. Her calm, measured responses stood in stark contrast to the agitated evasions of the complainants. "I never harbored any desire to engage in physical altercations with anyone," she testified. "My sole wish was to attend school safely. When that became unattainable, I defended myself and others who were incapable of defending themselves." During her closing arguments, Ms. Rodriguez directly appealed to the judge's intrinsic sense of justice. "Your Honor, the evidence presented is unequivocally clear. My client acted in justifiable self-defense against relentless harassment and unprovoked aggression. To impose criminal penalties upon her for protecting herself and others would effectively convey a message that bullies can operate with impunity while their victims face criminal charges for the simple act of standing up for themselves." Judge Thompson deliberated for approximately 30 minutes before returning to the bench. The courtroom held its collective breath as she fixed her gaze directly upon Kesha. After a thorough review of all presented evidence and testimony, this court hereby finds the defendant not guilty on all charges. Furthermore, I recommend that the district attorney initiate an investigation into potential charges of perjury against the complainants. The courtroom erupted in resounding cheers as Kesha embraced her mother and attorney, finally liberated from the legal menace that had loomed over her for weeks. The resounding bang of the gavel echoed through the courthouse as Judge Thompson's pronouncement settled over the packed assembly. Derek Morrison remained frozen at the plaintiff's table, his face ashen as the stark reality of potential perjury charges began to sink in. Behind him, his father's expression had transformed from one of confident authority to barely contained fury. "You assured me this was a foregone conclusion," Mr. Morrison hissed at Blackwood as reporters began to converge. "You assured me the girl stood no chance." Blackwood was already meticulously packing his briefcase, eager to extricate himself from the unfolding disaster. "Your son deliberately misled me regarding the evidence. There was nothing I could do once those recordings surfaced." Across the aisle, Jake Wilson and Tommy Bradley sat in a state of stunned silence as their parents grappled with the implications of what had just transpired. Mrs. Wilson's face was pale with shock. "Perjury charges. That constitutes a felony, does it not?" "Mom, we simply—" Jake began. But his mother abruptly cut him off. "We will finalize this discussion at our residence, and you will personally extend apologies to every family impacted by this unfortunate situation." Concurrently, the young men from Riverside were facing their own comeuppance. Brad Matthews witnessed his carefully cultivated persona of a tough individual disintegrate as his father departed without uttering a single word. Connor and Tyler followed, their earlier swagger entirely vanished. "This is preposterous," Tyler stammered as they navigated their way through the throng. "We could potentially face incarceration for this. This should have been contemplated prior to your decision to provide testimony under oath." Connor's mother interjected sharply upon hearing this. "I instilled better values in you than this." As the families of the accusers departed with a sense of disgrace, the courthouse celebration was just commencing. Students who had testified surrounded Kesha with tears of elation and profound relief. "You accomplished it," Jessica exclaimed, embracing Kesha. "You genuinely triumphed over them. We achieved it," Kesha corrected, her gaze sweeping over the faces that had offered her unwavering support. "All of us, collectively." Dr. Williams observed her daughter from a short distance, her expression a blend of immense pride and astonishment. The unassuming young woman who had relocated from Detroit mere months ago had ascended to become a beacon of fortitude for an entire community. "I'm exceptionally proud of you, my dear," she whispered as Kesh approached her, "not solely for your victory, but for the exemplary manner in which you navigated this entire ordeal." Ms. Rodriguez gathered her documents with a palpable sense of satisfaction. In her 2 decades of legal practice, she had seldom encountered a case where justice seemed so unequivocally evident. "The district attorney will undoubtedly initiate proceedings for perjury," she informed the Williams family, "submitting fabricated police reports and perjuring oneself under oath. These young men are confronting substantial legal challenges ahead." Beyond the courthouse, news vehicles lined the street, with reporters actively interviewing students, parents, and community members regarding this pivotal case. The narrative had transcended the confines of Millbrook, evolving into a national discourse on bullying, self-preservation, and the systemic shortcomings in student protection. "This sends an unequivocal message," Marcus Thompson stated to a reporter, flanked by numerous students. "You cannot torment individuals and subsequently assume the role of a victim when they retaliate." The weeks that followed the trial brought about significant and immediate transformations at Millbrook High. Principal Martinez, chastened by her court testimony concerning unaddressed harassment complaints, instituted new protocols for handling allegations of bullying. The principle of zero tolerance transitioned from mere rhetoric in a handbook to a tangible reality. Derek Morrison never returned to the school. The perjury charges, coupled with the civil litigation initiated by several families whose children he had subjected to harassment, necessitated his enrollment in a private military academy situated 3 states away. His parents discreetly sold their residence and relocated, finding it untenable to remain in a community where their son's transgressions had been brought to light. Jake Wilson and Tommy Bradley entered pleas of guilty to the charge of filing false police reports, receiving sentences of community service and probation. Both were mandated to participate in counseling sessions and complete anger management programs. Jake's university scholarship was rescinded, and Tommy faced permanent expulsion from the football team. The boys from Riverside encountered analogous repercussions. Brad Matthews was expelled and faced numerous charges of harassment from victims who emerged following the trial. Connor and Tyler were suspended pending the resolution of their own legal proceedings, their reputations severely tarnished. However, the most profound alteration manifested in Kesha's self-defense initiative, which not only received official endorsement, but was also expanded to encompass the entire student body. 3 months after the trial, Coach Rodriguez stood in the Central Gymnasium, overseeing more than 100 students actively participating in what was now recognized as the Student Empowerment and Safety Program. The waiting list had grown so extensive that they had introduced evening sessions and weekend workshops. "I never envisioned it reaching such a scale," he conveyed to Kesha as she guided a group of freshmen through fundamental defensive maneuvers. "Nor did I," Kesha responded, adjusting a student's posture, But I believe individuals were receptive to something of this nature. They simply required the affirmation that they possessed the capacity to be resilient. The program had evolved beyond mere physical self-defense, incorporating conflict resolution, bystander intervention training, and peer mediation. Students acquired not only the skills to protect themselves, but also the ability to identify and de-escalate bullying before it escalated. Sarah, who had been among Kesha's initial cohort of students, now served as a peer instructor for younger attendees. The most rewarding aspect is not learning to fight, she informed a group of apprehensive 7th graders. It's realizing that you no longer have to live in fear. The transformation was palpable throughout the school. Interactions in the hallways had undergone a fundamental shift. Students exhibited increased confidence, voiced their opinions more readily, and most critically, offered mutual support when challenges arose. Danny, who had frequently been the target of Derek's aggression, now spearheaded a peer support group for students grappling with anxiety and depression stemming from prior instances of bullying. Kesha didn't just impart physical self-defense skills to us, he explained to new members. She taught us that we are deserving of feeling secure and that we possess the agency to effectuate that reality. The positive repercussions extended beyond the boundaries of Millbrook High. Other educational institutions within the district formally requested the implementation of analogous programs. Anti-bullying advocacy organizations nationwide initiated contact for expert consultation. College recruiters began to take note of Kesha's leadership qualities and her significant impact on the community. On a tranquil Friday afternoon in the spring, 6 months subsequent to the trial, Kesha found herself in the very same cafeteria where Derek had initially demanded protection money. However, the ambience was now entirely dissimilar. Students from diverse grade levels and social circles were interspersed. Conversations were more animated, and the underlying tension that had once permeated the space had dissipated. Jessica approached her table, a letter in her hand. "This arrived at the main office addressed to you," she announced, a broad grin on her face. Kesha opened the envelope to discover a handwritten note from a student attending a school in California. "I saw your story on the news and initiated my own self-defense group here. We currently have 30 members and have recorded 0 instances of bullying this semester. Thank you for demonstrating to us that we are not compelled to endure mistreatment." "Another one?" Marcus inquired, taking a seat opposite her. "Another one," Kesha confirmed, adding the letter to an expanding collection she maintained in her locker. As she surveyed the transformed cafeteria, then gazed out the windows at students engaged in confidence-building exercises in the courtyard, Kesha reflected on the profound changes that had occurred since that initial day when she had refused to pay Derek's protection money. She had arrived at Millbrook with the intention of avoiding any trouble and navigating her academic career discreetly. Instead, she had discovered that sometimes the most significant conflicts are not those we initiate, but those that find us. And on occasion, standing firm for what is just can alter not only one's own life, but an entire community. The bell sounded, signifying the conclusion of the lunch period. As students gathered their belongings and proceeded to their classrooms, they moved with an energy and self-assurance that would have been unimaginable mere months prior. Keisha smiled as she packed her own possessions. Her mother had been correct in her assessment of Millbrook being distinct from Detroit. It was different. It was superior, and she had played an integral role in its betterment. Walking through hallways that had once felt unwelcoming, surrounded by students who had discovered their voices and their inner strength, Kesha Williams understood that certain struggles are indeed worth every ounce of effort invested. I hope you found this narrative enjoyable. Kindly register your approval of this video and subscribe to ensure you do not miss future installments. In the interim, I have personally selected 2 additional stories for your viewing pleasure, which I believe you will find engaging. Have a wonderful day.